The protagonist stands alone in a crimson-drenched battlefield, and the air is thick with the aftermath of a massive fight. Blood pools across the ground as the hero assesses the loss, and everything around him is stained a deep, horrible red. An evil voice taunts triumphantly from the shadows, and he is told his sect and his life have reached their end. The elite warriors from across the lands have been completely wiped out, and heavy silence falls over the scattered remains of the fighters. A green, ghostly voice delivers the cruelest truth, and the disciple of the Mount Hua Sect is utterly doomed. He falls to his knees in terrible pain, but his eyes burn with fierce defiance as he grips the hilt of his sword tightly. Blood splatters as he lets out a mighty, roaring breath, while the enemy gloats over the victory of killing him. The evil presence jeers at the dying warrior's efforts, but the warrior acts with complete and total disdain. A glowing green aura surrounds the sinister, towering figure, and the battle reaches its ultimate, terrifying climax. The villain acknowledges the supreme swordsmanship of Mount Hua and speaks with an intimidating, commanding voice. The warrior unleashes a fierce battle cry of defiance, absolutely refusing to listen to any more taunts. The dark aura speaks of a tragic and unavoidable end, and declares a great shame is about to occur today. The legendary legacy of Mount Hua is mentioned for one last time, and the enemy notes the sad defeat of the noble sect. The villain's red, glowing eyes promise a terrible future catastrophe, as he warns that the demons are far from gone. The dark prophecy echoes through the frozen air, and the world will fall under the rule of evil in the future. The message of doom rings out with absolute certainty, stating that no one will be able to stop their return. A massive blast of pink and white energy explodes violently, and the protagonist is sent flying backwards from the sheer force. His lifeless body hits the cold, dark ground with a heavy crash, and the villain triumphantly walks away from the broken remains. The scene shifts to a bright, peaceful memory of falling pink blossoms, and a young, messy-haired boy trains with a wooden sword. A spirited instructor yells a harsh order at the distracted boy, and the bratty disciple gets called out for his antics. The happy memories of his younger days flash vividly before him, and the strict senior emphasizes the path of a martial artist. The stern reminder to be an ascetic practitioner rings out clearly, for he has always been a mischievous, energetic student. Returning to the dying present, he admits his deep and honest regret and laments not being strong enough to protect everyone. He imagines a reality where he had trained much harder long ago, filling him with a sharp, painful frustration. A comforting memory of a great leader comes to his mind, and the gentle elder assures him that Mount Hua will endure. A beautiful, peaceful vision of his home mountain appears, and the spirit promises it will always stand tall and strong. The timeline jumps to a clumsy and energetic training moment, and a student wildly swings a wooden sword in attack. An opponent confidently plans a simple block against the swing, ready for an easy, straightforward battle move. The attacker is completely shocked by how easily the block was made, as the hand flies up instantly to intercept the sword. The protagonist sits battered and bruised under a tall, shady tree, and a friendly face approaches him with a bright, open greeting. He looks up wearily and recognizes the person in front of him, and the friendly guy offers a kind, concerned greeting. He holds up 2 fingers in a surprisingly determined and confident pose, and announces that he has exactly 2 questions to ask. He points a firm finger directly at his own chest and bluntly asks if he looks like a beggar right now. The kind stranger points out the obvious rags he is currently wearing, and a hilarious and energetic realization hits him in the face. He lets out an explosive scream of absolute despair, then quickly follows up by asking about a legendary demon. The companion speaks with a casual, completely laid-back shrug, and admits he knows of the heavenly demon leader. He drops a massive bombshell while rubbing his chin casually, and claims this legendary demon died over a century ago. The protagonist's eyes go wide with absolute and total shock as he realizes he has been reincarnated 100 years later. A wave of lonely confusion hits him as he processes this massive news, for he has been left completely alone in an unfamiliar world. He frantically asks about his original home and his legacy, and demands to know exactly what happened to the Mount Hua Sect. The companion looks back at him with absolute, complete bafflement, and has no idea what the Mount Hua Sect is. He enthusiastically explains that it is one of the 10 great sects, and speaks with big, booming confidence. He points at a detailed map of the current great powers, and lists off the famous sect names like the Shaolin Temple. The friend delivers the final, shocking news with a simple shrug. The Mount Hua Sect does not exist in this new era. The companion looks completely baffled by the wild talk about the 10 great sects. He points out that the Mount Hua Sect simply does not exist anymore. The protagonist grabs him by the collar and shakes him frantically in disbelief. He insists that the Southern Island sect cannot possibly be one of the great powers now. The friend mentions hearing a rumor about a sect in the Shaanxi province map. The protagonist's eyes light up with a sudden spark of hope. The companion tries to warn him against heading off on such a foolish journey. He suggests the tired boy just go back to begging instead. The protagonist shuts him down with a furious yell of defiance. He demands straight answers about the body he has woken up in. He learns that his current name is just a random beggar title with no real past. The friend introduces himself as Beek Cho and says his younger buddy is Yu Pil. The protagonist stands up and asks for the exact direction to Mount Hua. He sighs deeply and prepares himself for the long road ahead. He takes off running through the forest with all his might, determined to reach his goal. He insists he is going there completely on foot, no matter what. He quickly collapses onto the dirt, gasping for air in complete exhaustion. This new body is far too weak for such a long journey. He screams in frustration about his physical limits and the impossibility of the trip. He declares that his legendary trickery is about to come into play. He recalls fondly how his past disciples used to regret skipping their basic training. He remembers how they also regretted getting caught stealing the sect's liquor. He proudly declares that he can simply do everything all over again from the start. He is ready for a fresh beginning with boundless enthusiasm. He remembers that he knows numerous inner cultivation techniques from his past life. He decides to learn a cheap technique sold in illegal street stores. He calmly explains that this simple technique is actually a perfect beginner cleansing method. It is the exact foundation every Mount Hua disciple learns first. He focuses on cleansing his body and gathering purified energy into his danshan. He is building a rock-solid foundation for his future martial arts power. The blue energy settles into his core, and he declares the basic training is finally done. He is excited to see his potential grow like a snowball into an avalanche. He stumbles out of the forest, completely drained and exhausted from his initial effort. He admits that basic cleansing gives zero help for actual physical strength. A group of older beggars spots him sitting on the ground and gets angry. They decide to teach him a lesson for taking all their begging coins. He stands up and proudly announces his true identity as the Plum Blossom Sword Saint. He yells at the beggars to get lost before he loses his temper. The terrified beggars instantly bow down and apologize with great fear. He asks them why they are calling a great swordsman a beggar chief. He laughs confidently and tells them he is not someone to mess with. He promises to get violent if they ever cross his path again. The beggars run away in sheer terror, completely humiliated by his presence. He is satisfied that he scared them off without a single sword swing. He stands before the towering gates of Mount Hua with a huge grin. He greets the sect leader and announces his name with great energy. He declares that he is Chung Myung and wants to join the Mount Hua Sect. He looks ready to start his new life with a big smile. The sect leader listens calmly as a man named announces the arrival of a strange child at the gate. The leader confirms that the sect is no longer accepting new disciples, but admits the boy was far too desperate to turn away. The boy greets the sect leader with a wide, cheerful smile, though he is inwardly seething with irritation. To understand why, the story flashes back to just a few moments ago. He arrives at the mountain base, exhausted but determined, gripping a rough wooden staff for support. He declares it is finally time to climb the mountain and begins his grueling ascent. He drags himself up the steep stone steps, gasping for air and pushing his weak body to its absolute limit. He climbs with sheer stubbornness, refusing to stop no matter how much his legs burn. He loses his grip and slips on the loose rocks, tumbling down the cliffside in a frantic scramble. He catches himself at the last moment and pulls his body back up with raw grit. He continues his climb with relentless, crazy determination, promising that tenacity will always find a way. He drags himself over the final ledge and collapses on the ground at the summit. He stands up and looks around, panting heavily, but suddenly freezes in absolute shock. The grand entrance sign of the Mount Hua Sect is completely missing from its place. He rushes over and grabs his head in wild panic, screaming about the sign that So Young cleans every morning. A door opens, and a surprised martial artist steps out to see what the racket is. The man asks the ragged boy how he managed to climb the mountain all alone. The boy stammers that he simply climbed up, and then asks if the man is from the Mount Hua Sect. The man confirms he is a practitioner and tells the boy to come inside. He explains that it is too late to climb back down, even though they are not accepting new people. The boy stands in the training ground and looks around with mounting horror. The marble floor has been replaced with plain dirt, and the golden palace is completely gone. He points to the empty lot and demands to know where the grand buildings went. The man casually mentions that those palaces once stood there but are gone now. The boy mutters under his breath about the lost glory and the suffering of his sect. The man overhears and admits it is indeed a wound from a glorious past. The man guides him to the Yuyuan temple, noting that this structure is still intact. He tells the boy to go inside and pay his respects to the ancestors. The boy steps in and is immediately crushed by what he sees. The golden candlestick and the hanging scrolls given by the emperor have all been sold off. He collapses to his knees in despair as he realizes the sacred artifacts are gone. The man casually adds that they luckily found a merchant to buy them. The boy remembers the white plum blossom that symbolized his sect's spirit. He screams in frustration that these dumbasses sold it all off for money. He slams his head on the floor in a desperate, dramatic plea. He begs to meet the sect leader so he can officially join the Mount Hua Sect. Back in the present, the sect leader asks if the boy really knows about the sect. The boy keeps his composure and says yes, calculating his next move. The boy silently decides to use a scenario about a lost disciple named Chung Myung. He plans to claim he is the grandson of the lumberjack who saved that disciple. He imagines this plot will automatically place him on the same level as the sect leader. He grins with a sly, mischievous glint in his eyes. The sect leader looks at him for a long moment and then unexpectedly agrees. He says that if the boy really wants to join, he should be allowed to do so. The boy blinks in complete, stunned confusion at the sudden acceptance. The sect leader tells him to stay and rest for the night before anything else. The new arrival peeks curiously into a room in the boarding house and is immediately caught by a startled disciple. The disciple loudly accuses him of being a thief and calls for help. A crowd of disciples gathers around, grumbling about the commotion, while the boy sighs in frustration at the hassle. A stern senior named Ungum storms in and demands silence, scolding everyone for causing trouble during training time. The senior asks the newcomer for his name, and the boy introduces himself as Chung Myung. Ungum notes that he must be the new resident of the White Plum Blossom boarding house. Alone in the hallway, Chung Myung stares ahead with a sly, sharp grin. He silently vows to give his cute successors the proper attention they deserve, though his methods might be a bit unconventional. Later, a senior disciple approaches him with a ridiculous, teasing suggestion. He claims that taking off clothes and dancing is the best way for men to bond and strengthen affection. Chung Myung gives him a flat, deadpan look and asks a single question. Without waiting for an answer, he suddenly lashes out and sends the senior flying through the air with a brutal kick. The other disciples freeze in absolute shock as their senior crashes to the ground. Chung Myung cracks his knuckles and cheerfully asks if he should start with a little beating. He calmly assures the terrified group that he won't harm them and asks for a moment of their time. He then asks them what exactly happened to the heavenly golden palace and why the sect is such a mess. The disciples stammer nervously and explain that the Plum Blossom Sword Saint led a great battle against the demons. The heavenly demon sect retaliated by burning down the entire mountain in revenge. Chung Myung listens quietly and then realizes the horrible truth. The sect fell into ruin directly because of his own past actions. He sighs heavily and mutters that he truly hates his life right now. The sect leader suggests they move the most precious texts from the library to a safer location. Chung Myung gleefully agrees with the idea and tells them to proceed. He cheerfully declares that he approves of this plan. He walks into the training grounds and watches the disciples practice a slow, basic sword form. A senior explains that this is the equilibrium sword technique, the foundation of all Mount Hua martial arts. Chung Myung stares at them in utter disbelief and scoffs at the terrible training method. He complains that teaching this complicated form to beginners is like teaching the alphabet with a thesis book. He asks what else they learn, and the senior nervously lists a few other basic forms. Chung Myung finally asks about the sacred technique, the Tei Flummox sword technique. The senior admits that they learned it, but it was weak and lacking in Taoist aspects. Chung Myung's jaw drops in shock as he learns they simply threw it away. He screams in outrage, demanding to know what happened to the legendary 24-movement Plum Blossom Sword technique. The senior apologizes and explains they were told it was useless. Chung Myung calms down and turns to a senior named Jo Gull with a friendly request. He asks Jo Gull to gather every disciple in front of the boarding house at 5 in the morning. He notes that the sect currently has no wealth, no proper techniques, and no talented disciples. He decides that training these untalented seniors will be his first step toward rebuilding. The next morning, the entire boarding house shakes violently as the disciples rush outside. Chung Myung stands at the front and cheerfully greets his seniors for their first group training session. He smiles brightly and declares that they will train together every morning at this time. Meanwhile, Ungum sits in his room and wonders why no one came to greet him that day. He sighs and assumed they must still be sleeping in the boarding house. Outside, Joe Gull struggles to lift a heavy wooden pole, while Chung Myung watches with a sharp, expectant gaze. Chung Myung cracks his knuckles and prepares to put them through an intense workout. He counts out a ridiculously high number of repetitions as the disciples sweat and strain. Joe Gull struggles under the heavy wooden pole, his legs shaking violently as he forces himself to stand. Behind him, the newcomer watches with an intense, unblinking stare. The disciple counts out a ridiculously high number of repetitions, his voice strained and exhausted. The chapter title flashes across the screen as the brutal morning training continues. A senior notices the poor kid's legs are about to give out and orders someone to bring water immediately. The newcomer casually brushes off the concern with a bright, carefree smile. Gum arrives and asks what on earth happened to all the collapsed disciples on the ground. The boy cheerfully explains that they just did a little morning exercise to start the day. He adds that everyone must have been a bit too hyped up on the first day. Gum stares at him with a deeply suspicious and unimpressed look. The boy says he will simply stop the training if that is what the senior wants. Gum is completely taken aback by the sudden, easy surrender. He quickly shifts his focus to the fact that the newcomer threatened his seniors. The boy just smiles in response, clearly unfazed by the accusation. Gum argues that the third-class disciples will look like idiots for being pushed around by a newbie. He insists he cannot allow this situation to continue. He gives the boy exactly 1 month to prove that his training actually works. The boy happily accepts the challenge and promises to bring results within that time. He proudly declares that his Sahyungs have incredible determination, and he truly respects them for it. He points out that none of them complained despite the harsh training session. Gum mutters that they probably just didn't dare to complain to his face. The boy ignores the comment and cheerfully boasts about his control over the disciples. He explains that he trains every morning because they need to sacrifice sleep for strength. He claims that courtesy is the most important part of treating one's seniors. He promises to regard his Sahyung's words as absolute law from the skies. Gum is impressed by his respectful attitude and unconventional way of thinking. He admits that he never expected the disciples to voluntarily train so early in the morning. He tells them they may continue their training with his full approval. The boy blinks in surprise at the sudden permission, but quickly recovers his composure. He thanks the senior and promises to keep up the good work. A few days pass, and the boy meditates in his room, gathering blue energy around his body. He observes that the White Plum Blossom boarding house is basically a private dormitory for them. He notes that the sect leader and the pedigree are weak compared to 100 years ago. The disciples are terribly weak, and the senior practitioners lack real combat strength. At dinner, Joe Gull snaps at some younger disciples for talking too much and bothering him. He tells them to stop treating him like their personal errand boy. Later, Joe Gull approaches a senior named Yu Pil and asks for a moment of his time. Yu Pil notices that Joe Gull looks surprisingly refreshed lately. Joe Gull admits it is a difficult question to answer, but he reveals his true thoughts. He confesses that he once believed the Mount Hua Sect was completely done for. Yu Pil warns him not to be so disrespectful about the sect's future. Joe Gull agrees and admits that he has changed his mind since the newcomer arrived. He realizes that he has never pushed himself this hard in training before. He is impressed that the kid never even showed a hint of exhaustion during their brutal sessions. Yu Pil quietly agrees that he shares the same thoughts about the newcomer. The boy sits in a tree above them, listening with a satisfied smirk. He counts ungum as the second person successfully convinced of his plan. He knows he still has a long way to go before the sect is fully restored. Suddenly, loud shouts echo from the front gate as a group of men demand to see the sect leader. They bang on the doors and shout threats about coming inside. The boy looks down from the tree in surprise as the commotion grows louder. The intruders scream for the sect leader to come out immediately. The crowd outside the gate demands repayment for their debts, shouting that the sect leader must come out immediately. Chung Myung leans against a wall nearby, looking completely shocked that the sect is actually in this kind of financial trouble. The sect leader steps forward and calmly listens to the debt collector's demands. He acknowledges that the agreed payment date has already passed and asks for a little more understanding. The creditor explains that many people pushed him to come and collect, and he has been patient with the sect for many years. He politely but firmly insists that the sect must finally settle its debts. Back in the boarding house, the disciples gossip nervously about the debt collectors at the front gate. Joe Gull admits he does not know the details, but he does know the money was borrowed from a man named Pavilion Owner Kong. He mentions that the sect leader personally went to borrow the money in the past. Chung Myung listens quietly, absorbing the information about the sect's dire financial situation. Chung Myung notes that the Mount Hua Sect's strength does not lie in combat power, but in its history and reputation. He observes that the sect has become significantly weaker and more vulnerable in modern times. He compares the sect's fragility to a tender duck that splits apart with the lightest touch. The biggest danger facing them is that someone might exploit their long, proud history. Pavilion owner Kong smirks to himself as he considers his next move against the sect. He asks his associate what they plan to do with the temple after taking it from them. He insists that the old temple is worth far more than it looks at first glance. His associate remains confused, unable to grasp the full value of the property. Meanwhile, a small, cloaked figure in dark clothing sneaks quietly through the streets. A passerby notices the shady character and awkwardly tries to call out to him. The figure turns around, and the passerby notes that he looks exactly like a stereotypical burglar from a drawing. He also mutters to himself that this burglar looks ridiculously small.